So I'm going to begin the recording now. This session will be posted to the RCLS YouTube channel probably either later today or tomorrow morning, so you can always revisit it. If you require a certificate for CE, you'll email me following the session. I'll be sending a follow-up email, so you can just respond to that and request your certificate. And we will go ahead and issue that certificate. So this session today is going to take about 1 hour. We have with us Jane Bentley, who's the senior librarian from the New York State Talking Book and Braille Library. And there's going to be plenty of time for you to answer or to ask any questions and for Jane to answer those questions. So we're going to go ahead and get started so that we are fairly prompt with our time. If you have questions, just feel free to place them in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat as the session goes along. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it on over to Jane. Jane, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, thanks, Jen. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you very much for inviting me to join you this morning. I'm really excited to share information about our library. So my name is Jane Bentley, and I'm a senior librarian at the New York State Talking Book and Braille Library. And today I'm going to provide an overview of our library's services and explain how patrons can apply and then access our materials. I'm also going to share some information with you about how institutions can apply for service, and that includes public libraries. And I'm going to share some ideas for ways that public libraries can help promote the service and share with community members. And as Jen said, if you want to pop any questions into the chat as you think of them, feel free. But we will have time at the end also to have discussion and Q&A. So you'll be able to unmute yourself and ask questions there too. So let's get started. There we go. So the New York State Talking Book and Braille Library, otherwise known as TIBL, which is TBBL, is a division of the New York State Library located in Albany, New York. And we are also considered a regional library in a nationwide program called, or coordinated by the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled, otherwise known as NLS. And NLS is a division of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. And NLS is really instrumental in how our services function. They provide our collection materials, they determine policies for eligibility, and they help us implement changes to services in order to streamline services for our patrons and improve how we distribute materials to them. Through a partnership with NLS, our library circulates playback equipment, accessories, and NLS produced Braille and audio materials, that's books and magazines, to eligible individuals in our service region entirely for free. Individuals are eligible for our service if they have difficulty reading standard print due to blindness, a visual impairment, a physical disability, or a reading disability. We offer different options for a service, so individuals can customize how they get their books. The majority of our patrons receive their books delivered to their homes through the US mail, while others choose to download their books through our free downloading service called BARD, which we will talk about in a few slides. And some do a combination of the two. Now, I mentioned that we lend materials to patrons in our service area. So our service area is defined as the 55 counties of upstate New York, and that covers Westchester County and the counties north in New York State. If an individual lives south of Westchester County, then their local Talking Book and Braille library would be the Andrew Highskill Braille and Talking Book Library, which is located in Manhattan. And this library serves residents living in New York City and Long Island regions. This library provides the same services we do, just to a different geographic area. Each state actually has at least one NLS regional library. So if an eligible patron were to move out of New York State, they could connect with another Talking Book and Braille library within the NLS network. In addition to serving individuals, we also serve institutions. And we serve institutions that serve eligible individuals. So institutions include libraries, public and private schools, and health facilities like a nursing home, a hospital, or a veterans organization. So in this section, I will explain qualifications for service and how to apply for both individuals and institutions. So to become a Tibble patron, an individual must first qualify for service. And an individual qualifies if they are unable to read standard print due to a temporary or permanent visual or physical limitation. So this could be due to blindness. If an individual is legally blind and they cannot read standard print, then they would qualify. If an individual has a visual impairment, where it's difficult to read standard print despite corrective lenses, or maybe they have an eye condition that causes their eyes to fatigue over time. Or maybe the individual has limited vision due to glaucoma or cataracts, for example, then they could qualify for service. If an individual has a physical limitation, where the person cannot physically hold a book and manipulate the pages, then they could qualify for service as well. For example, if an individual has had a stroke or an accident that impacts their ability to read a standard book, then they could qualify. And if an individual has a reading disability that's severe enough that it impacts reading, for example, if an individual has dyslexia and it makes reading printed text difficult or impossible, then that individual could qualify as well. If someone is not sure if they qualify, we do ask that they contact us for help, and we can help determine if they would qualify for service. Now, if an individual does qualify for service, then they can apply for their own account and start receiving books. Our application for individual service is available on our website. It's in PDF and Word format. We are also happy to mail applications and fax applications. We can do that by request. Applications ask for the individual's name, address, email. We ask for an alternate contact in case we cannot reach the applicant. And we ask for the reason for eligibility. So why is the person applying? We also ask that the individual include some of their reading preferences. So they can include some of the things they like to read, and in contrast, they can include things that they do not like to read. That way we know what kinds of things they might like, and we can send those. And we also ask for a reading level. So this is particularly important for younger readers. So we can adjust the reading level and send appropriate content by the level that they're reading. Next, applications must be certified by a competent authority. And this just means that a designated person has to sign off on the application to verify eligibility for the applicant. Individuals listed here are considered competent authorities. So we have librarians and library staff, school staff like educators, we have counselors and social workers, and medical staff such as ophthalmologists, registered nurses, health aides, which does include a home health aide, and doctors of medicine. I like to bring this point up because librarians and library staff are considered competent authorities. So if you are working with a patron at your library and you know that they have difficulty reading standard print and you feel that they would qualify for service and would benefit, please go right ahead and help them complete an application and sign off on the application. Fairly recently, NLS changed their policy for individuals applying due to a reading disability. At one time, an applicant needed a medical diagnosis and a signature from a medical doctor in order to apply. But this is no longer necessary. Now, an individual who qualifies due to a reading disability could have an educator, a reading specialist, or a librarian, for example, sign off on their application. This is very exciting news because we believe that a barrier has been removed for some individuals in gaining access to our service. So when an application is complete, it can be submitted by email, fax, or by mail. And I do want to point out here that we do accept electronic signatures. So this has been extremely important in recent time when individuals cannot meet one-on-one with their certifier. So it's important to know. So institutions may apply for service as well. If an organization assists eligible individuals, then that institution can apply for service and receive books on behalf of community members who have difficulty reading standard print. We have an application for institutions available on our website. So a good example of an institution patron would be a school or an assisted living facility where there might be multiple eligible individuals attending or living at the institution. That organization could opt to become a TIBL member and then borrow materials on behalf of their eligible individuals. Staff could borrow materials and then distribute the audio books or Braille books and our player to eligible individuals. So examples of institution partners could be public libraries, schools, healthcare facilities, veterans organizations, and colleges. These are just examples. We certainly would work with other organizations as well if they assisted eligible individuals. So an institution membership for a public library is primarily about helping to bring awareness to the service. There could be eligible individuals using your library that could directly benefit from TIBL's resources, but maybe they're not aware that the service exists, or they didn't know that they qualified. So by promoting the service, you might also reach families and friends of individuals who could benefit from service. So a public library partnership with TIBL allows the public library to also borrow materials to better share resources with their communities. So you could borrow books and our player, which we'll talk about in a moment. In addition to our books and our player, you could also register for a demonstration BARD account, which we will talk about in a moment as well, but BARD is our downloading service. All of these options are really important for sharing TIBL's resources, but also for library staff to be able to use the materials and see how they work and just become familiar with our services to better share them with community members. Public libraries choose to promote TIBL's services in different ways. So we'll take a look toward the end of the presentation at some ideas. And then if you have any ideas for ways to promote the service, I would love to hear from you. So what happens next? So after an individual or an institution applies for service, we would create a patron account for that new applicant. So once you have a new account with us, we would then reach out to you. So a reader advisor or a librarian would reach out to the new patron to welcome them and discuss service. We like to connect with every new patron because they often have questions. But it's also nice to make a connection so that new patron knows they can reach out to us with any questions they might have. We also send a welcome packet, and this is in the form of a large print mailing and an email. And it just provides some general information about our library, but also more importantly, it has our contact information. So the new patron, family and friends can reach out to us. And for institutions, a librarian would reach out to you to explain the service and see how we can help. So on this slide, I want to talk about the variety of formats and equipment that we lend to our patrons, as well as the types of books and magazines that we have in our collection. So our patrons can select to read materials in different formats to fit their needs. So we offer Braille books and magazines for different reading levels. We have children's titles and adult titles. We also have a wonderful collection of print Braille books. And print Braille books are children's books with large print text and a Braille plastic overlay accompanying each page. Braille books are great for sharing with a reading buddy. Because they're accessible to individuals learning and reading Braille, and for individuals learning and reading printed text. So this image here on the left is just a small collection of some of our print Braille titles. They typically range from pre-K to grade 3 as their interest level. Braille books arrive in a vinyl case, and they have a return label that accompanies the case. So the individual can have a free return. And we'll talk about returns a little later. Audiobooks and magazines on cartridge are very popular. We supply playback equipment if a patron selects to receive their reading material in this format. And so on the left here, we have a picture of a audio cartridge and the case that would come in. And then on the right here, we have an image of the talking book player. Just like Braille, audiobooks and magazines can be returned for free as well. An audio cartridge arrives in a thin blue plastic container, which is pictured here. The patron can open the container by unsnapping 2 plastic snaps, and then inside is an audio cartridge. And this audio cartridge is designed to fit naturally into the talking book player. It fits in only one way, so it's a streamlined design. And so the image here on the right is there's a cartridge inserted into the player. So one end of the cartridge, the end with the finger hole, as you see in this image here, is intentional. So the individual using the player knows which end to insert the cartridge into the player. The end that fits into the audio cartridge, the flat side, actually has a built-in flash drive there. So our audio cartridges are actually flash drives with digital files preloaded, and our digital player plays the files found on the audio cartridge. Which brings me to our new service. So over the last few months, our library has started changing how we lend audiobooks through the mail to a process called duplication on demand, or DoD. DoD is an initiative from the National Library Service to help streamline our services for our patrons. Until recently, our books on cartridge typically contained just one book. But with duplication on demand, we have been able to add multiple books to a single cartridge. So with DoD, patrons receive more books, but on fewer cartridges. So for example, if a patron had been getting 10 audiobooks through the mail, they would have been getting 10 single cartridges. Now with duplication, we could add those 10 books onto one cartridge for the patron. Patrons can continue listening to their cartridges using their talking book player, so nothing changes for their equipment. And this initiative is made possible because Tibble staff have access to audio files from the NLS downloading service, BARD, which again, we'll talk about on the next slide. Audio files can be downloaded and added to flash drives on the flash drive on the cartridge. And then, so because of that, it means we can customize cartridges. So we can put particular books on cartridges for individuals, or we can reorder books on cartridges. So an individual is getting books in the order that they ask. And because we can access the download files through BARD, it means there are no wait lists for any of our audiobooks. Each cartridge comes with a printed list of books that are on the cartridge itself, and it's in large print text. But the talking book player also has a function on it that allows the individual to listen to the index of the titles on the cartridge as well. So far, this service has been very successful. We are excited about this change, and we feel that it has absolutely streamlined the service for our patrons so far. Okay, so what is BARD and how do you use it? Patrons can opt to download their books and magazines through the National Library Service's web-based program called BARD, which stands for Braille and Audio Reading Download. And BARD allows patrons to search and download books and magazines in audio and electronic Braille formats. Books can be downloaded using the free BARD mobile app, which is available for Android and iOS devices. And this is an image of the iOS interface here. Or a patron could download through BARD's website using a computer and transfer the downloaded files to a flash drive or an audio cartridge that they have provided or that they've purchased themselves. And then they could play their downloaded files using our talking book player. So on this slide, I wanted to talk about the equipment and accessories that we can loan to patrons for free. If any type of equipment malfunctions in any way, we replace it at no cost to the patron. We lend a talking book player to patrons if they are interested in listening to books and magazines, and the player is pictured here. Institutions may also borrow a player to learn how the player works, but also to help meet the needs of readers on site. So to give you an idea of the size of the player, it's about 9 inches long, 6 inches wide, and weighs about 2.5 pounds. Players have a rechargeable battery, and they can be played plugged in. The player has about 27 to 30 hours of battery life if it's fully charged. This makes it convenient if an individual wants to charge up the player, then they could bring it traveling or just simply bring it from room to room. The player does not require the internet to operate. The player offers simple navigation. So the control buttons you can see here are brightly colored and they're large. The white, yellow, red, and green buttons contrast with the dark color of the player itself, and that's all intentional for individuals who have low vision. There are also Braille indicators alongside each button. You can kind of see them in the picture here. One really helpful feature is the fact that the player has built-in audio instructions. So when an individual patron or an institution staff member receives the player for the first time, they can turn it on and press any button on the player to hear an announcement of that button's functionality. We also provide large print instructions within the player's mailing box, but it's really nice to have the backup audio instructions. We also provide a high volume player. This player is for individuals with profound hearing loss. It does require an additional application that must be signed by a medical doctor because the player is so amplified. But if the traditional player is not loud enough, then that would be a really great option. Patrons can also receive headphones if they need some privacy when they listen to their books. The player does have a standard headphone jack, so if a patron does have their own set of headphones, they could certainly use those. And we also offer a breath switch. So a breath switch is for patrons with limited dexterity, where it's difficult to hold the player and manipulate the buttons on the player. The breath switch is an add-on to the player that allows the patron to manipulate the buttons using their breath. And we also offer download accessories. So these accessories are available to individuals who are downloading using Bard and their computer. So they could download audio materials using their computer and transfer files to a flash drive or a blank cartridge, and then insert those, as I mentioned before, into the player and listen to their downloaded books. So we do offer a transfer cord for the cartridge and a USB adapter. So on this slide, I wanted to talk about the content in our collection. So the kinds of things we have that we can lend to individuals and institutions. So as a regional library within the National Library Services Network, NLS selects and provides our titles, and we share them with patrons in our service region. When an individual becomes a member of our library, they have access to thousands of fiction and nonfiction titles. Materials are available for readers of all ages. And we have quite a variety of subject areas. So patrons can select from bestsellers. We have brand new books available. We have award winners and different types of subject areas. So mysteries and Westerns are very popular with our patrons, but we also have a lot of nonfiction titles as well. Biographies, for example, are really popular. It would be as if a patron were browsing their public library or their school library's collection. Patrons also have access to over 80 magazine titles, including several magazines for children. Patrons do receive a magazine listing when they join the library, and we can then help facilitate the lending, or the subscription rather, of that magazine. If a patron is downloading, then they could access all of our magazines through Bard, including back issues, so that's really nice. Patrons may also request music scores and books about music from the National Library Services music section. Now, the music section is really neat. It's the largest collection of materials of its kind in the world, so it's a really impressive collection. Resources include music sheets in both Braille and large print, as well as recorded books about musicians and books about how to play an instrument. So it's like music appreciation titles as well. We also have books in foreign languages. including books in Spanish and French, and then smaller collections of other languages as well. As of yesterday, we just were notified that the National Library Service is actually creating a foreign language quarterly magazine. It's also available online, where individuals can review the new popular foreign titles that have been added to the collection, because the National Library Service is working hard to increase the number of foreign materials in the collection. So that's really neat. That was an exciting new update. We also, I also wanted to mention that one thing we do not have are textbooks. And so our collection is limited when it comes to study guides as well. But if an individual is looking for a book for class that they could use for a project or recreational reading, then we could certainly help them with that. So in this next section, I wanted to explain the different ways individuals and institutions can borrow all of these materials. So one way to access books and magazines is to download them through Bard. So many patrons choose to download their books and magazines through Bard because of the flexibility that it offers. If someone is interested in using Bard, they must first be a Tibble patron, and then they can register for Bard separately. So it's a quick online form. We would approve the form if the individual is a Tibble patron, and then we would send information about how to get started with downloading. And we do provide information about how to get started when an individual first applies as well. If a patron or someone on behalf of a patron can download, then it offers really impressive benefits. Patrons can download at their own convenience, anytime, anywhere they have an internet connection. A patron can even download a book or magazine when they do have a connection and then listen to that book or magazine offline later. Every title in our collection is available as a digital download in audio format. And then a majority of our titles are also available in electronic Braille format as well. All titles are simultaneous use, which means that the same book can be read by multiple patrons at the same time, and there are no conflicts. And that also means there are no wait lists. There are no loan periods either. So you can keep a book or magazine on your device or your computer storage as long as you have the space for it. We have patrons that have downloaded so many things that they do have to make decisions about what to delete, but they could always re-download. And books are added regularly, so there's always something new to review and download. Public library staff are encouraged to create a Bard account. The public library accounts are considered demonstration accounts and offer access to 4 titles, but it does still give staff an idea of how Bard works, and it can be helpful if you wanted to show someone Bard to give them an idea of how it works. But also if someone had a question, you might be better prepared to help them. But you could certainly always refer them back to our library as well. And as I mentioned previously, there are certain ways you can download titles on Bard. So there's a few different options. So patrons can access Bard through the mobile app, which is pictured here. And again, I mentioned it's available on Android and iOS devices. The other option is to download books from the Bard website using a computer, and then transferring the files to a flash drive or a cartridge. And so I just wanted to show the image here of how to of what that looks like. So an individual could download books to a flash drive, and then there's a USB port on the side of the player. And the accessory that we provide is called the USB adapter, and it would allow that flash drive to sit flush to the machine rather than sticking out. So you can see the benefit of that because this is sticking out here and could easily get knocked out. And we also provide the transfer cord for the cartridge, which you can see here. It allows a patron to transfer a book from a computer to their cartridge. No matter how a patron accesses BARD, whether it's through the BARD mobile app or through the website, BARD is compatible with accessibility tools like screen readers and VoiceOver. And again, public libraries are encouraged to register and test BARD out with the mobile app and by downloading on a computer. And here I wanted to share another way patrons might borrow books through BARD. Commercial Braille displays or note takers are players that are compatible with BARD and allow a patron to download books and magazines in electronic Braille format. Electronic Braille books and magazines can be downloaded from BARD and then transferred to a refreshable Braille display, which is pictured here. They could transfer the files using a cord or a wireless connection. And then the device allows the patron to, once transferred, to read a Braille book or magazine line by line. Rounded pins rise and fall on the machine to display Braille characters. So the individual could read using their refreshable Braille display. In addition to a Braille display or note taker, a patron might be using a handheld media player that's also compatible with BARD. So certain media players allow a patron to download books through BARD, and it also offers additional functionality. So someone might prefer to use this rather than our talking book player. A media player might have the ability to play music, record audio, and download other types of book files beyond the files that we have available in BARD. Currently, a patron would have to use their own Braille display to download e-Braille files. But the National Library Service is conducting a pilot project right now where they are testing Braille displays with other network libraries. So if successful, NLS plans to make these devices available to Braille readers in all of the network libraries. So we would be able to distribute this kind of machine out to our Braille readers. An e-reader through NLS would promote Braille literacy and increase the use of our Braille collection in BARD. So it'd be a really exciting change to our service. So right now, NLS is getting feedback about this pilot program, and we will keep our patrons up to date on the progress. We already have a growing list of interested patrons, so we're anxious to get started. So by far, the most popular way to receive books and magazines is to have them delivered through the US Postal Service to a specific address. Audio books are added to cartridges and mailed from our library in Albany, and Braille titles are also selected and mailed from our library in Albany through the mail. There are two ways to receive books through the mail. Patrons can receive books on an automatic basis, where our computer system scans for books based on subject preferences in a patron's account. These books are added to cartridges and then sent out. When a patron returns a cartridge, they would get another cartridge sent out full of new books. And patrons may also have Braille books sent automatically as well. Patrons really like this automatic model because they have a continuous flow of books on a variety of subjects, and they do not have to be concerned about selecting particular books. So they like getting books by certain subject areas or authors rather than having to pick individual titles. And then as a patron's preferences change or their reading level changes, we can always make that adjustment in their account. So the other option for getting books is to select them by title and author. So patrons can contact our library and submit a book request, or they can access our online catalog and place their own requests. Our online catalog allows patrons to add books to their request list. So for audiobooks, books can be added to a request list, and then the books would be added to a cartridge and then mailed out to the patron. But for Braille, patrons can check the availability of the Braille titles in our collection housed on our shelves. And then they could place a request for the Braille books. If a book is available, then it would go out to the patron. Patrons do receive a login to the catalog when they join the library, and institutions do as well. So institution staff members can learn how our catalog works and potentially help a patron navigate the site. So patrons are absolutely welcome to browse our online collection and see what kinds of titles we have. But the majority of our patrons prefer to learn about our new recordings and publications by accessing the NLS catalogs. So the catalogs are called the Talking Book Topics and the Braille Book Review, and they're both bi-monthly listings of just a small sampling of the new resources that we can provide. Books are listed in these catalogs by subject area, and then individuals have the option to read a summary of each title to see if it might be something that they might like to borrow. So patrons are subscribed to one or both of the catalogs when they join the library, depending on their reading format. So Talking Book Topics is for audio materials, and the Braille Book Review is just for Braille materials. Catalogs are available in large print, audio, Braille, and if someone is accessing Bard, then both catalogs are available through Bard as well. So we often get questions about our lending policies, so I wanted to touch on that. So for new patrons getting audiobooks, we lend 3 cartridges with 6 books each. And if a patron is reading Braille, then we can lend 3 books or 3 Braille books to start. This is just to get started. Quotas can change and often do change once someone has been a member of our library. We have some individuals getting 3 cartridges with 30 books on each. And certainly the Braille titles can change as well. So it's just to get people started. And for lending periods, because we can create cartridges for patrons, we do not have a lending period for our audio materials. If someone wants a new set of books in audio format, then they can return their cartridge, and then we would send them another cartridge with additional books on it. Certainly, if someone is not interested in service at all, we do ask that they return their materials because we can reissue the player and we can use their audio cartridges again. Braille books are typically loaned for 30 to 60 days. We have a limited number of copies for our Braille books, so a waitlist forms if someone has something checked out and other people make requests. There is a lending period for our Braille materials. And then in addition to our lending policy, I wanted to mention returns. All materials ship free through the US mail as free matter for the blind. There's never a charge for our patrons. When a patron is finished listening to their audiobooks on cartridge, then a patron can remove the address card located on the outside of the mailing case. And we have a sticker with our address displayed. So the individual could put their case right in their outgoing mail. For Braille books, a patron can locate the address card on the outside of the vinyl mailing case. And one side of that address card reads the patron's address or the institution's address. And on the opposite side, it reads our library's address. So the individual can take the address card out, flip it over, and reinsert the card, and then put that Braille book in their outgoing mail. So when patrons join the library, I often find that they were referred to us through their public library. So public libraries absolutely play an important role in connecting individuals of all ages to our services. So before we move on to questions, I want to go over a few ways public libraries could promote TIBL's service. These are just suggestions. These are a few things that I've noticed other libraries doing, so I wanted to share. First off, you always have TIBL's support. So if you have questions or your patrons have questions that you're not sure about, feel free to refer them to our library staff. That's what we're here for. We're here to help you, and we're here to help your patrons. So do not hesitate to reach out. Some libraries choose to have our brochures and flyers handy in case someone asks about the service. So if you're interested, we could certainly send you materials that you can distribute or just have ready in case someone has a question. Some libraries borrow a player and books for display purposes, which could prompt some questions and start a conversation with your patrons. If you have a large print collection, it might be a great place to put some of our materials, including our flyers, because it's possible that if someone is using your large print materials, they might also be interested in learning more about TIBL. For newsletters or your website, if you do have a library newsletter, you could consider highlighting TIBL's resources there. And if you needed some help developing a blurb in your newsletter, TIBL staff are absolutely here to help you with that. So just let us know if we can help. And you're certainly welcome to post a link to our site on your website if you have a resources page, for example, just to add some further information for individuals if they're exploring. When it comes to programming, TIBL staff are available for virtual sessions if you wanted to do something with your library staff or if you wanted to do something with the public. Just let us know if we can help. And for your regular programming, where you think an audience might be interested in TIBL, you could have some information available for them to pick up. An example of an audience who might be interested in TIBL could include seniors. So the majority of our patrons are aging adults who are experiencing vision loss. So if you had a program where you thought people might be interested in learning about TIBL, we could provide some flyers or brochures in case you wanted to have those available. And another audience to remember includes younger readers. So if you have a youth program, it might be helpful to have some resources just available for families to pick up. Families might learn about TIBL for the first time through their public library. So for outreach, libraries are welcome to distribute information when doing outreach to community groups. I recently spoke with a librarian who wanted to go share information about her library to her community. So she was going to a senior center and she thought it might also be helpful to bring some information about TIBL along. So I sent some brochures her way. So if you are doing anything where out in the community and you think that it might be helpful to have some TIBL resources available, please let us know and we can help provide that. Another example of a program or an outreach program, is a home delivery program. So if you are reaching out to individuals at home, you could certainly provide brochures to individuals And so again, let us know if we can help. And when it comes to registration, again, we have some libraries helping individuals apply for TIBL or applying for BARD. And as we saw before, librarians and library staff can certify applications. So this is something that you certainly can help with. We have some librarians who have helped individuals sign up for service, and then they email the application to us on the patron's behalf. So you're certainly welcome to do that. Library staff can also opt to contact us on behalf of patrons. So we have some patrons who are comfortable working with their public librarian or library staff member. And so they will reach out to their public library for, or to make book requests, and librarian or library staff member contacts us with the patron's book request. So kind of a go-between. So that's certainly okay too. We are happy to help either way. And then some libraries have TIBL materials available to lend to patrons. So occasionally we've had libraries borrow material like the player and some sample books, and patrons at your library can take it for a test run to see if they might like to then sign up for service. And then a deposit collection. So you could consider having a deposit collection at your library for individuals who are TIBL patrons who might like to borrow materials on site at your library. It's something to consider. Although patrons signing up for service also, most patrons like to have their books delivered to their home address. But as I said, this is something you could consider. So these are just suggestions. Again, if there's something you'd like to help with, or you want to kind of brainstorm ideas on how to share with your community, we would be happy to help you. So again, I want to thank everyone for attending. I hope you learned more about TIBL today and you feel comfortable sharing information with your community members. If anyone has any questions, I would love to see if I can help. Or if you have any ideas for ways to promote TIBL and share it out, I would love to hear from you too.
Hi, Jane. A question came through. It says, can libraries find out how many people living in their service area are taking advantage of this service?
I could pull some reports and by geographic area or by county and report back to you to see who's using or how many people are using it. Is that what you mean? Like how many patrons in your area are currently using the service?
I believe, yes.
Okay.
That's exactly it.
Cool. Yep, just let me know. You could email this general email, or Jen, I can follow up with you. You can provide my contact information out to everybody if you'd like. So I'll.
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Okay.
So I'm gonna direct actually that this person contact you directly, and I'll send out Jane's contact information when I send out the follow-up email.
Okay, cool. That's great.
Okay, are there any other questions for Jane for today? And if they're not at this time, that's okay. Jane's available to answer. Oh, we have a question. Can we get a copy of the slideshow presentation?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Excellent.
I can send that to you, Jen.
Yeah, and then I'll share that out. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Perfect. Great. Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any further questions coming through.
Okay.
Yeah,
if anyone thinks of anything, please feel free to reach out. Even if you think it's silly, it's not, just send us an email or give us a call, or you can email me directly too when Jen sends out my information. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, Jane.
Oh, wait, I did have a question that just occurred to me.
Yeah.
So how can libraries test out BARD? Do we have are you going to be able to send us a login information or?
Yep. So a public library would want to be, you would first be a member of our library, and you might already be a member. If you're not sure, you can also ask me and I can look up your library and see if you are a Tibble member and if there are any edits or updates we need to make to contact information. But once you're a Tibble member, a public library can then register for a demonstration account. And I see your library here. I'll take a look. I believe you are. And I can email a link to the demonstration BARD registration, and you can go ahead and test that out. And I also would like to follow up if an individual is interested in learning how to download and they do have an account, with their permission, you can certainly help them access their site and help them download the book that they're looking for. But that's why having the demonstration account is really handy, because you can still give it a go on your end and see how it works. So I can go ahead and email you the link to that.
All right, thank you, Jane.
Sure.
Okay, thank you everyone for attending. I will send out the follow-up email. Thank you, Jane, for providing us with this information and time. And thank you. Yeah, and I'm going to say thanks, everyone. Have a great day, and you'll get that information from me either this afternoon or tomorrow. So just be on the lookout for that email.
Yep, perfect.
Excellent. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.